We're back, and today we're talking about the biggest issue that Lord of Mysteries is facing. Is the anime actually confusing, or are a lot of people just blowing this out of proportion? We all know the anime community. They love to blow things out of proportion. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Now, I am anime only, and I do have reaction videos up. Wink, wink. Now, I think the confusion that's happening with Lord of Mysteries is the fact that, for example, the first 3 episodes, the pacing of those 3 episodes are extremely fast. And I'm going to give you an example here with episode 4 and how good the pacing and the explanation that happened in that episode is so good in comparison to the first 3 episodes, right? For example, in episode 4, right off the bat, we were told about ritualistic magic. Neo explains to Klein what ritualistic magic is, how it works, how it's performed. Then we see the outcome of that ritualistic magic. And then we see later in the episode, Klein using that ritualistic magic to essentially use it for his advantage and get rid of the villain of that specific episode. So everything in that episode had to do with ritualistic magic, and they showed us how it works, how it functions, and how it was used to defeat the last, boss, you could say, of that episode. Everything in there makes sense because everything in that episode had one specific function: ritualistic magic, and it made sense all the way through. But if we go back to the first 3 episodes, it's a different story. I mean, right off the bat, the first 3 episodes just throw so much information at us and doesn't really give us time to consume said information. I mean, right off the bat, I can already think of, for example, transmigration, which it really is just like isekai, right? A little different, but again, when an anime only says isekai, some of the web novels say, well, no, it's not really an isekai, it's more like transmigration, right? So again, that creates further confusion. Then we have the fog, we have beyonders, sequences, potions, what they do. We have the different powers that they get. We have dreams, going into dreams, reading memories, corpses, right? They're throwing all this information in the span of, 30 minutes and don't really give the viewers time to consume that information and understand that information, right? So what happens after a week, right? Well, unless you watch the episode 2 times or 3 times, or you go online and have discussions about Lord of Mysteries or follow different accounts that are kind of explaining some of the stuff that happened in the episode, you're gonna be lost, right? So it's almost like you have to, do homework to be able to understand and remember all this information so that when you watch the next episode, you have readily available that information so you can understand what's actually happening. And I will say, in the first 3 episodes, that pacing is causing that confusion because of the amount of data that you have to process, while episode 4 doesn't. And to some extent, episode 5 kind of does the same thing. Because you see, episode 5 have everything to do with Triss/Trissy. And a lot of web novel readers are saying that they skipped a lot of content, and I think that's another part that's causing confusion within the fandom, right? Because web novels are saying, oh, they skipped all this stuff, not knowing the structure of the anime compared to the light novel, right? And we see here that with an interview with Cuttlefish, they're following an event-based structure for the anime, or the dongwa, however you want to say it, right? Because instead of adopting, for example, Triss storyline/Trissy storyline into multiple episodes where we have different events happening throughout the different episodes, they instead decided to adopt Trissy's complete storyline, right? From going from Triss, sequence 8 to sequence 7, becoming Trissy into one single episode. So the viewers can actually see all the events happening in one episode. And I think that's a very good thing. Because again, if you're splitting all this stuff into multiple parts, what's gonna end up happening, the average viewer is not gonna remember all these little details. And when it actually happens, it might not hit as good as it would have if it was all contained into one episode, right? So this is what actually is explaining what happened with Cuttlefish interview, explaining why the light novel and the anime are different, and why you think web novel people might think that they're skipping content. In reality, they're not skipping the content. The content is going to be shown in later episodes. We just have to wait for it. Now, the other part that I've seen a lot of people, because every single episode when it releases, I see some reaction videos, some big content creators kind of talking about how they're kind of lost with the anime, that they don't know what's happening, that they're still confused. And I will say, if you're still confused about episode 5, it's definitely like a skill issue. But again, I can kind of understand if you're only watching it once and only once, you're gonna miss some stuff, right? Me personally, I like the anime so much that not only do I watch it on my reaction videos, Wink, wink, check it out. But I also watch it in my own time, right after, right? Like maybe a couple of days later, I rewatch the episode just so I can, really focus in and watch it. And maybe I miss some stuff that I'm reacting to it. So of course I'm gonna miss some stuff. But I rewatch the episode. But on top of that, I also go online to fellow content creators that really know the content because they're web novel readers, and I see some of their explanation and stuff like that. So that's another added bonus. But the average viewer is not gonna do that, right? Especially if they're not really vibing with Lord of Mysteries. I mean, for example, in the last 3 episodes, 3 new orders were introduced, right? 3. And I feel like what's causing confusion once again is that every single episodes were like switching scenes, switching to a whole other storyline without finishing the current storyline that we're dealing with, right? For example, in episode 3, we were introduced to the Secret Order, which is supposed to be this evil organization that, is hidden. They're doing stuff behind the scenes, and that's why they're looking for the Antigonus notebook. Then episode 4, we were introduced to the Aurora Order, which again, it was insane. But then in episode 5, we didn't really talk about none of those orders. Instead, we were introduced to the Demoness sect, right? So in 3 different episodes, we were introduced to 3 different organizations. And in every one of those episodes, we never finished the storyline for those, organizations that were introduced. Now, my theory that, once again, you can see in my reaction videos, wink, wink, I think that they're introducing all these different organizations because maybe by the end of the season, or maybe in season 2, everything is going to converge. Everything's going to come together and everything is going to make sense. But again, a lot of people, I guess they're not patient. They just want all the answers given to you right there and then. And I don't think that's how it works, right? I don't think that's how Lord of Mysteries works. And I feel like a lot of people just don't understand that, right? Because again, as the way the story is being told is not a linear story that we have, and we need to hit point A, point B, point C in every single episode. Instead, I think the structure of Lord of Mysteries is that we get information each episode that at the end everything is gonna make sense. And if I can compare this to an anime that I also made reaction videos to, and it was also very confusing, is an anime called When They Cry. Now, When They Cry does a very different style of storytelling that, while it's not a one-to-one to Lord of Mysteries, it is confusing at the beginning, and it's meant to be that way because the first half of When They Cry, everything is happening, all the events are happening. You don't really know why. You don't really know why certain characters are making certain decisions, and it's really confusing. But when you get to the second half of the When They Cry anime, they switch the storyline, and we kind of go back in time, and we see the different perspectives of different anime characters in When They Cry, and now everything clicks, everything makes sense, right? But I think Lord of Mysteries is a little different because Lord of Mysteries, the lore in Lord of Mysteries is so heavy, is so rich, that when they throw all this information onto you, you really do have to remember it because it will be recalled later episodes. So yeah, Lord of Mysteries is definitely a confusing anime, but I do think at the very least they're overblowing how confusing it actually is because we're not meant to have the answers right now. We gotta wait and see, right? If by the end of the season we still are confused as you were in like episode 1, 2, and 3, I will say that is a skill issue. I don't expect to have answers to all of these questions by the end of the season, but I do expect to have some questions answered by the end of the season. And I honestly cannot wait. Me personally, I am loving Lord of the Mysteries. I know it's confusing, but we do get answers here and there. We do get explanations here and there. And the pacing is being fixed. At least episode 4 and 5 are way better than episodes 1 and 3. And I think it's only going to get better from here. I think we only got, 6 more episodes to go because I think season 1 is only like 11 episodes. But I'm here for it every single time. Let me know what you think. If you're still struggling, my recommendation is go watch other content creators, and find a good one, right? That doesn't spoil it, explains it, and stuff like that. And if you're a web novel reader, don't ruin it for anime only. Remember, they're anime only. The structure to the light novel is different. Instead of being toxic, just explain what's happening, right? Explain some of the stuff without actually spoiling it. But let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree with what I said on this video. And like always, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you on the next episode. Peace out. Bye.